Matthew 14. Beginning in verse 22, the inspired word of God reads as follows. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. While he dismissed the crowds, and after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a long way from the land beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said it was a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came to Jesus. And when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. God sent the disciples to the boat. Get out of the boat. Jesus is walking on water, but while the other disciples don't recognize Jesus, Peter does. Wants to go to Jesus. Peter wants to follow Jesus because he knows that no matter how dark the night, no matter how high the waves, no matter how strong the wind or wet the water, Peter knows that it was safer to be out of the ship in a storm with Jesus than to be in the ship in a storm without Jesus. I can hear the other disciples saying, "But Peter, you can't walk on water. It's impossible. It's foolish. You'll get wet. You'll drown. It's dangerous." But Jesus says, "Come." The boat is the safest place to be. But Jesus says, "Come." The rules of normalcy say you should stay in the boat, but Jesus says, "Come." Peter shows his faith, gets out of the boat, puts his life at risk, and holds his hand out to Jesus. Begins to follow Jesus, and he walks on water. Now we all know the story, and we often condemn Peter, because Peter, in his following Jesus, takes his eyes off Jesus, and he begins to sink. Peter has a lapse of faith, which is why he begins to fall, even though the Bible records Jesus saying to Peter, "O you of little faith." But while we condemn Peter, let's give Peter some credit tonight, because at least Peter got out of the boat, and the rest of the disciples stayed in the boat. A little faith is better than no faith at all. If Peter had little faith, the other disciples had no faith, because if you remain in the boat, you'll never know what it's like to walk on water. Being safe is easy. It's not hard work to do what everyone else is doing or to do what we've always done, but change is hard. At least Peter got out of the boat, which is more than what the other disciples did. But yet how many of us stay in boats without ever exercising faith and walking in fullness of what God has for our lives? Peter knew that no matter the storms we face in life, it's always, what's your boat? Safest with Jesus, I want to talk about the other 11 disciples who are still in the boat. Why are they still in the boat? There are two reasons. Number one, because they're afraid, and number two, because they have a boat, right? Because when you have a boat on the water, you stay in the boat. It's not rocket science. And here's what I mean. When fear takes hold of our lives, we usually turn to something that makes us feel safe, even if it's not God. So let me ask you a very important question today. What's your boat? See, your boat is whatever represents safety and security to you. Apart from God, if you want to know what your boat is, your fear will tell you. Just ask yourself this. When fear sets in, where do I turn instead of God? That's your boat. It might be a parent, a friend, a spouse, or your children. Maybe it's your career, your physical appearance, or your gifting. It could be your possessions, money, alcohol, or self-pity. Maybe it's the number of likes you get on Instagram. Whatever it is, God's telling you today, like Peter, come get out of the boat and seek God with all of your heart and let Him turn your fear into faith by trusting Him alone. I was reading the great Helen Keller, Some of you may know her. She was a great author and activist, and she was asked the question because she was born blind. She was asked, what could be worse than being born blind? She said, having sight with no vision, don't be afraid to go out on a limb. Don't be afraid to try something different. Don't be afraid to get out of the boat. But you know what? It's tough to get out. It's tough to get out of the boat. There's 12. There are 12 guys in the boat. There's only one that gets out of the boat, just one. The other 11 are like white, knuckling it there. It's like we like the boat. Lord, it's a good thing that the boat's holding us up. It's scary to get out of the boat, isn't it? You know, let me tell you some things about the boat in their situation. It was a real boat. The boat in our situation today is not a real boat. It's a symbol. It represents things in our lives. Look at the boat. Safety, security, and comfort. And when you're asked to leave, leave that which is safe, secure, and comfortable to do what it takes to step out on stormy seas. That's scary, man. This boat just seems so safe, and man, I think I don't want to leave here. Because out there is the unknown. I've never been out there, and I don't know what that's like. Then sinking and drowning, and so I don't really want to venture out there, Lord. I like it in here. Why don't you come in here, and then we'll have time together? What is your boat, and what is your boat? Hard to leave because of one thing, and that's fear. Fear makes it hard to leave the boat. John Ortberg. In his discussion of this passage, he says, you want to know what your boat is. You think about getting out and stepping out on the water with Jesus and whatever, grips your heart with fear and shows you what your boat is for most of us. But for some, you know what it is. It's the fear of failure. Hey, it's hard to leave the boat because we get afraid, and the devil uses fear. You know, fear is of the devil. Fear is not of God. You're going to fail. You're going to falter. God's not going to see you through, man. You better stay in the boat. Yeah, it's going out of the boat. That's for crazy people. You need to stay here, where it's safe, secure, and comfortable. But it's hard to leave because of fear. But remember, your boat is what's keeping you from walking on the water. If you're going to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. You can't stay in the boat and walk on water. You had to get out of the boat in order to walk on the water with Jesus. You have to get out of the boat in order to walk by faith and not by sight. It's a step of faith. If you're going to get out of the boat and walk on the water, you've got to take that step of faith into that, which seems so scary. Hey, I'd rather be Peter and walk on the water 2 or 3 steps than be one of the other 11 staying in the boat, because Jesus is there to catch you. Listen, you got out of the boat. Whatever your boat is, you get out of that boat. You stand on the water and walk on the water with Jesus. Even if you have a sinking spell, you don't have to fear, because he will be there to help you and to lift you up, and none of us walks on the water perfectly. We have sinking spells, but all we have to do is say, Lord, save me. Lord, help me in this situation. I want to walk with you. I want to walk by faith and not by sight. But man, I've gotten my eyes on all the things I see and the things I feel, and the Lord says, walk with me. Oh, your little faith, why did you? Doubt, get your eyes back on me so you can trust him to help you even through any sinking spells. And I want to tell you today, somebody here, that it's time for you to get out of the boat. Someone here today is at the comfort level of their situation. If you're comfortable in your normalcy, comfortable in your contentment, regularity, you're comfortable with your rebellion, your independence, your worry, your anxiety, you're comfortable in something, but God is calling you today to come out of that comfort level you got, to make a move, get out of the routine, get out of living normalcy, get out of accepting mediocrity, stretch the parameters of your life, get out of your comfort zone and move into your uncomfortable zone. Stop sticking with tradition and learn to do something that requires you to make a move and get out of what's comfortable for you. Some of you won't do it because you're afraid of what other folks may say. You have to forget about what other folks say and do what God tells you to do. Peter gets out. Peter got out of the boat, and look how he got out of the boat in the midst of a terrible situation. They were afraid. So he's been asked to do something in the middle. Of doubters, let me promise you something. When you make a decision to do something, God has told you to do it, and you begin to make the moves. Guess what somebody's going to question you about? Somebody's going to doubt you, somebody's going to call your names and call you crazy, and they're going to say all kinds of things. They're going to say you don't have naysayers. Family members are not going to support you. Friends are not going to understand. But guess what? Anybody can stay in. The boat that's the easy thing to do, anybody can stay at their comfort level. Anybody can stay and do it the way you've been doing it. But it takes a person of faith and a person of courage and a person willing to obey God to do something that the rest of the jokers won't do.